You notice the trend I've been doing is everything that why the younger generation hasn't been feeling successful, and we're still gonna feel as if it's impossible now.
This is a
So
mock
that's
monthly
what we're
household
watching
budget for an American family in
or looking
1985.
into.
If we compare that to a hypothetical budget in 2022, we can see that most expenses scaled with inflation, with a few exceptions. Rent, out of pocket healthcare costs, and childcare are notably more expensive in 2022, even when accounting for inflation. And costs associated with retirement increased by more than 60%. But these numbers are not accounting for a big X factor: consumer debt, such as credit cards and student loans. Total outstanding consumer credit was nearly $600 billion in December 1985. By 2022, it was nearly $4.9 trillion.
Debt has been rising over time. Student loans weren't really a thing for baby boomers.
Millennials have larger student loan balances, bigger mortgages, much bigger car payments than their parents did a
payments?
generation ago. In
Why are
addition
we
to
buying
more
expensive
expensive
cars?
childcare costs, higher prices pretty much across the board. So that does make it more difficult to set extra money aside or make any long-term plans.
We're living in two separate economies. The American dream that was pitched to the Gen Xers and the Boomers is no longer present in today's world.
A lot of people, particularly the working class and the part of the middle class, don't think their children will be as well off as they were. That's a problem.
Many people live in what I describe as at break even. Over the course of the year, they might make enough money to pay for basic living expenses and cover their bills.
But have you noticed that the older generation wants a lot of us to succeed, but we're just struggling like crazy?
But if one major thing happens, then they can get behind.
Here's why young American adults are struggling to make ends meet and what can be done. Millennials' net worth quadrupled from $3.9 trillion to nearly $16 trillion between 2019 and 2024, but more than half report living paycheck to paycheck.
That
A
doesn't make
lot
sense.
in this group have benefited from a strong jobs market and rising wages. And during the pandemic, many people bought a home. That made a lot of people wealthier, but more on paper.
There's plenty of houses out
being
there.
rich on paper and feeling well off has been referred to as phantom wealth. Your net worth has gotten greater, but you're not feeling richer necessarily.
It's taking young adults longer than their parents to meet some milestones, such as living on their own, buying property, and starting a family.
It's a lot harder for young people today to save up for markers of the American dream than it was for previous generations. When we look at home buying, as we all know, we're in historically tight housing markets. There are very few homes on the market, and those that are on the market are extremely expensive, not to mention expensive mortgage rates. And the prices of homes has escalated over the last few decades much faster than actual incomes. So it is actually much harder for a millennial or a Gen Z to save up for a down payment to buy a home.
It's not the overspending, it's the cost of living.
I think the middle class, unfortunately, is dead for millennials and Gen Zers, or best case scenario, the goalpost has just moved and it's still obtainable, but you have to make over six figures to have that middle
And
class
it's
life.
impossible.
But people who are older were in a better economic time growing up, because the big difference is what I call the big three. Millennials and Gen Zers are faced with outrageous housing prices, whether it's rent or owning, massive monthly college student loan debt payments, and daycare.
Freddie Smith made a career shift from actor to realtor and started making content about the state of the housing market.
In the summer of 2023, I was maybe one of the first or the handful that was able to say, hey, the housing prices hit 420, the interest rates hit 7%. You now need $120,000 to qualify for a home.
Yeah, we're a
And
joke.
It went viral. And then it just bled into people asking comments and me making more videos. Then it got into the boomer versus millennial debate, and it just kind of continued to grow from there, and it took its own shape. I had to rebuild my life in my early 30s, so I'm really relating to the 22-year-olds who are building their
And
life.
I'm not trying to, when I watch these videos, I'm not trying to say someone screwed over someone else. All I'm saying is we just have it harder.
And it's a totally different economy than when I built mine when I was 19.
Not being able to save for a home has big retirement implications for millennials and Gen Z.
Those who don't own homes, now those are people who are in real trouble. They're trying to save to get their own place. They're paying high rent somewhere. They're commuting a long distance or trying to work at home.
Hey, that was
they
in
can pay-
Colorado.
they're paying
I know
high
that
rent
highway.
somewhere.
That's
They're
I-25.
commuting a long distance or trying to work at home so they can save on childcare or so they can save just on housing costs. Those living patterns are increasingly what's happening for younger workers.
In the 1980s, the typical first-time homebuyer was in their late 20s. With a 30-year mortgage, that would mean they owned their home outright by the time they retired in their 60s, providing them with a better chance at sticking to a fixed income in their retirement. A national housing shortage, high rent prices, and competition from wealthier buyers are all making it harder for young adults to buy their first home.
Isn't it weird how the bank can reject you for saying, like, if you want to buy a home and they're like, oh, you want to pay $2,000 a month for your home mortgage? Yeah, we can't do that. So instead, we actually want you to rent. Oh, okay. So now I gotta go find a place, $4,000 to $5,000, one bed, one bath, and you think I'm gonna rent?
In 2024,
Yeah, right, buddy.
the median first-time homebuyer was 38 years old, an all-time high.
You have a lot of people 25 to 34 who are looking to start a family and cannot find a home for their families. Maybe the homes aren't where they want them to be inside the city, but even outside a city, it's been very difficult for young families to find a place.
So I think it's healthy for us to try to find different ways that maybe home ownership doesn't have to be the symbol of the American dream. But then to counter that, on my own point, I encourage those who can afford homes to buy it, because once it's paid off, you're going to have a more comfortable retirement because
True.
you're not going to be subject to the ever-increasing rent prices.
But then you got to worry about the
Many
interest
Americans
rate.
are navigating a new kind of economic instability, which traditional financial advice may not prepare them for. Rachel Schneider co-authored the book The Financial Diaries with NYU professor Jonathan Mordock. They spent a year tracking the granular spending habits of 235 families.
What we saw was a huge amount of volatility. That was our core finding. The majority of Americans work hourly jobs.
Mhm.
And so for them, the amount of money that they earn fluctuates week by week. I get 30 hours this week versus 45 hours next week. And so as a result, income is really up and down over
And
the
it's not
course of
fixed
a
anymore.
month. And that flies in the face of all of the budgeting advice we usually give people.
There's a difference between surviving and thriving. And I just think if we're going to claim that we're the richest country, the best country in the world, why isn't everyone who's
Lies.
working 40 hours, 50 hours a week thriving? How is that possible?
It's not
On top
doable.
of income instability, cost of living is increasingly unstable.
Tariffs have added a lot of uncertainty into future economic conditions. We don't really know how this is going to play out just yet. And if people start to feel nervous about what lies ahead, then they may dial back on things like consumer spending.
The tariffs are creating uncertainty for those people. They don't know what to do. Businesses aren't hiring more people. They're just waiting to see they have a stable business environment they can go. Without stability, they can't. At the same time, the tariffs are going to create a big sales tax on lower income people who spend more on the basics, which are going to go up. And so that's going to create problems for them too.
Before they get into budgeting, I think you can budget out anything, but even if you stick to the budget, there may be something that comes up, right? So like emergency fund you have to have ready. But even if that's there, it can go blown into one spot, and next thing you know, you don't have an emergency budget. Then you start saving again. There's a vigorous cycle in all of this, and it's just difficult, man.
What the historians tell us that every single new generation gets complaints from the older generation about how they're behaving irresponsibly, immorally, blaming millennials for spending too much on avocado toast.
It's not student loans or a tough job market keeping millennials from buying homes. It's reportedly avocado toast.
The one piece
What?
of advice for young people out there for spending their money on avocado toast and don't have any goals, what would you say to them?
I would say to them,
I mean, what if you're making it at
get
home?
as
That's
much
different,
pleasure
right?
out of saving as you do spending.
This kind of advice is usually framed as a warning against lifestyle creep, which is the idea that as people earn more, they subtly start to spend more, and that's what prevents them from properly saving.
I think that's why there's so much confusion, because you can point to a millennial who spends $1,200 on DoorDash. Not
What?
But you can also point to a millennial who's very financially conscious, making $80,000, and is drowning in debt, and is living with a roommate, and is a lawyer at 29
Yeah, that's
years
crazy.
old. That is not right. If someone got straight A's in school, straight A's in college, got a bachelor's, got a master's degree, and is 29 making $80,000 and can't even get their own apartment,
Mm-hmm.
let alone purchase a house or have financial stability. So that's where I think there's something broken in the system.
Even though households have become significantly wealthier, many consumers
Before they say it again, I think we just don't feel wealthier because with prices going up on everything, again, I'm not trying to make this political. I'm going to make this economical as much as possible. With prices going up as they have been, it's just difficult. Yeah, when prices go up for stuff, then we want an increase in our pay. But at the same time, if the prices go down, it doesn't mean our wages should go down. In fact, they should probably stay where they're at. Then if prices start going up again, maybe we ask for a little bit more, right? You don't ask for a little bit more right away. You just wait to see, and then you ask for an increase in pay. That's
consumer goods are also a lot
just
more
want some
expensive,
equality.
and at the same time, Americans are now largely on their own when it comes to things like insurance, retirement savings, healthcare. That makes it harder just across the board to feel financially secure. In some ways, Americans are even more financially vulnerable now. Even as prices have come up significantly, consumer spending hasn't really changed that much, and that leaves more Americans relying on things like credit cards to kind of make ends meet at the end of the month. With economists now forecasting a possible recession in the months or year ahead, there's a greater chance that many Americans won't be prepared for an economic shock.
All I'm saying is, as well, is that we're born into this life thinking it's fair, it's fine and dandy. You know, you grow up with this feeling that you can do anything. Then at a certain point, you realize life is unfair, but I'm not complaining, but what I'm saying is it becomes unfair because you're just having a hard time, right? The hard times are showing and you don't know how to get past a hard time. So how do we get past it is what I'm trying to figure out, for not just for myself, but for a lot of people. I'm not trying to come up with a solution. I'm just trying to think of ways that we could overcome it, not just by one person, but for all of us together, right? More of a group effort solution than a singular person solution.
There aren't so many people in the middle class. There's a big
Life
working
is fair
class.
but unfair.
Those are people who helped elect the president, who want stable jobs, who want rising wages, who want to be able to do things for their family and improve life
Am I
for
making
their kids
sense?
that they don't feel they can do now. But those people haven't seen much respite.
The core kernel of wisdom in the avocado toast issue
I don't even have
is
avocado toast
make choices
in the
about what
morning.
really matters to you. You spend money on stuff that will be of value to you. Also, good advice is create a savings habit. Unfortunately, the way that ends up getting translated to people is you should set aside 6 months of earnings in case of an emergency. And most people are like, yeah, that's impossible. That's
Yeah, I
impossible.
said
It's a
the
huge
same
amount
thing.
of money. And so what people then take from that is, I guess I can't save.
So I always encourage people, once you do get that promotion, just stay where you're at for a while and
Yes.
just accumulate money, even for just a year. Maybe buy yourself something nice, but just keep that money for a little while and just enjoy the freedom, because all of a sudden you're not as fearful at work because you got a little cushion.
There are more ways today to upskill than there have ever been before. I mean, there's online classes, certification programs, even
Yeah, but you have to make
online
time to do it.
degrees. So it is easier today to
It's easier, but
make
it's
yourself
hard at the
more
same time.
competitive in the job market, which will help if you do feel like your job or job security isn't what it used to be.
There's a societal need here. And some of that is about embracing and understanding that if you are struggling financially, it is not your fault. People often feel a lot of shame and distress when their financial lives are not going smoothly. And
Mhm.
yet, a lot of what they're experiencing is not the result of anything that they have done or could have done differently. It is the result of choices we as a society are making. And can we make those choices in a way that will allow me to be financially stable and upwardly mobile? And then I also think the reality is that societal change is slow, and any one individual does have to make their financial life work as best they can in this moment. We're going to see people
Wait, embrace
cohabitating.
co-ownership to make home ownership dreams come true. Yeah, but it's either you have roommates, which a lot of people do. I'm not saying no, that's not a bad. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's better. But when you're dating, I don't know if I'd say have co-ownership in a home. Once you're married, I would put that on the line, right? See if that is up for talks between the two people. Uh, but owning a home as a single person, it's doable as long as you're making a decent amount and as long as your payments aren't crazy. As long as they're a decent amount and you still have enough to live decently, not go out every day, but to maybe go out maybe once a month, right? You go out once a month, everything else you make at home, you get the groceries cost going up, but you still have, at least you still have something in the house to make and eat. You go out once a month. You don't spend too much on things. You don't overspending is what I'm saying. Don't overspend, right?
with
That's
friends
part of the
for
budgeting,
longer
but
and coming up with creative ways to
it's
share
doable but not
childcare
doable,
across
just depending on who you are.
families, because that's what it's going to take to make it work. And actually, we're going to see, I think, some real
I'm just
benefits in
yapping
community
here.
that could come out of that. So
Just
to look
yapping.
for the silver lining of, okay, I might not be able to be as independently financially stable, but what does that mean for the interconnections I can and should create with other people?
It's just harder out there, man. Life is fair, but it's unfair at the same time. We're born into this world thinking nothing of it, and next thing you know, we're in debt, and you die with debt. The only thing that's guaranteed in life is taxes and death. That's just about it. And whether you outlive one, you still have the other to worry about, right? I mean, so how do we as the younger generation make it? That's my question. We got to figure out a solution. Not a solution, but just something. We got to figure out something.